Hey everyone, it's Chris Ward here with the CBT Nugget series on ITIL Foundations. Today's nugget is also from the service design area, that part of the life cycle, and it's information security management. If you work in IT, you pretty much understand that any information that you have entered into a computer or up on a website somewhere is out there. And yes, they say they're going to secure it, and yes, we're not going to share that information, but isn't it amazing how that information all of a sudden shows up into somebody else's company, and then they start emailing you all this kind of stuff about, hey, would you like to buy this? Would you like to buy that? And that's just, I would say, fairly innocuous. But what about if your Social Security number that we use here in the United States gets in the hands of the wrong people, or your credit card information? Well, then that confidential information is not confidential anymore, and it's now being used against you. Same thing happens with IT services. When you are supplying a service to another business, pretty much they're going to be giving you information at some point. You might have it on your own systems. So what are you going to do to make sure that that information is safe? That's what this is all about. So we're getting closer to the end of our service design portion with all the processes that we have covered up until now, from supplier management, service level, service catalog, availability, capacity, and now we are going to dive into and check off information security management. But shh, don't tell anyone. When it comes to information security management, for the ITIL exam, they're primarily going to be concerned, at least at the foundation level, that you understand that information needs to be, you got it, secure. You just don't want everybody to know what's going on within your organization, which is why, if you notice at our definition here, it's to align the security with, see this, business security. Make sure that it's confidential. You know, the integrity of the data, availability. You notice it's the organization's assets, the information, the data, the IT services matches the agreed needs of the business. In other words, we obviously need to make certain some information gets out there, but you don't want to just show everything to everybody, because there are people that will use it for their own design. In fact, I like this shirt I saw at Spiceworks conventions called Spice World. This guy was wearing this shirt, and I found a picture of it out on the web, and it says, "Being evil so you don't have to." It's the information security engineers, and the whole thing is they try to break into systems and they try to test the security and the validity of the systems in order to make sure nobody who really wants to use that information and use it for their own good and to make money for themselves or for power or whatever reason that they want to do it. Some of the terms that we obviously are going to need to know is going to be confidentiality, which of course is that the data that needs to be out there is out there, but the data that needs to be safe is kept confidential. It's only to be read by the people who need to see it. A great tool that is out there. In fact, I was just talking with James Conrad about that just the other night, about how in Microsoft they have Active Directory Rights Management Services, ADRMS, which means that when you send information out, that you can be sure that only the person who's allowed to read that information is going to be able to open it. Do you have the right to look at that information? Risk management. Think about this. If your systems go down, or all of a sudden perhaps somebody doesn't encrypt some data like they're supposed to, or they're out using their own device. Now, that's that whole BYOD thing, where they're using their own device to send things, and that's not secure. Or maybe you're at home on your laptop and you go in as a VPN, and of course that's secure, but then you use that connection to then go out onto the internet. Well, that's not so secure. So you have to look at things that might cause problems, and you need to manage that risk. This is identifying, assessing, controlling risks. And sometimes people call it the process of finding the things that could go wrong and planning on what to do when they go wrong. That's obviously a good idea for risk management. Security management information system. Again, this is part of that service knowledge management system we're going to have. And guess what the information is going to be in there? Yeah, you got it. The security information on how you are protecting your environment. All the tools and the information that we use to support security. Now, this is an interesting one. There is going to, obviously, ITIL is big on this, and I think most companies are big on this, is to have some sort of policy, a list of rules or requirements for people that are working that they need to follow. Policies help prevent problems. Now, of course, policies can be ridiculous, and you obviously have to research and see if they're going to work, but this is the policy that's going to govern the organization's approach to ISM. How we're going to handle security. Are we going to make sure that everybody has to use secure email and digital certificates? Are you allowed to use your personal device to send email or read email within the company walls? I mean, those are things, or company or organization stuff. Threats are obviously going to be anything that might exploit vulnerabilities, which are going to be the things we're going to see down here. Maybe you could have a port that is open. That would be a vulnerability, which is basically any weakness that can be exploited by these threats. And the threat could be a denial of service attack, right? That you could attack that. So that's the basic things for threats versus vulnerabilities. They are tied in together. The threat is the thing that exploits the vulnerability. The vulnerability is the weakness that can obviously be exploited by the threat. So we always have to look for that. And by the way, this is not just for information. As part of your security management information, you're also going to be dealing with things like your computers. And what happens when you get rid of hard drives? Do you send them out to a place to get, like, I forget what they call it, the NSA has a wipe mechanism that, basically almost like boils them in acid or something like that, so no one could ever get them, or they maliciously, accidentally destroy them, as Gru would say in Despicable Me. So if you're very comfortable with these terms, you shouldn't have any problems with most of what's going to be on the exam. But there is one topic, though, I do want to point out so you are at least aware of it. Because information security management is all about confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our organization's info and the assets and everything that we have, there are obviously different ways of viewing that. And that's why you are going to want to use something called the ISMS, the Information Security Management System. This is something you might see in that small lit room after spending a large amount of money to answer questions on a computer screen. And essentially, when you are looking at your security, there is, of course, going to be physical security, right? One of the things that a lot of people were doing in airports, remember, they said, hey, keep your laptops. I mean, don't let them out of your sight. People will kind of follow you, grab your laptop, and then guess what? Everything that's on that hard drive, as much as it's encrypted, some things can be eventually broken into. There are obviously procedural things that we need to consider. I forgot my L. There we go. Procedural. These are going to be things that are how you secure things. And then, of course, there is the organization itself. So you will have organizational security procedures. These are things like your security policies. Does your employees know what they're supposed to be doing? How secure does your CEO, the ultimate board, want things to be? And so that's all going to, of course, help define what you do in the ISMS. Now, in the ITIL book here on security design, they talk about the process as being something that's formal. Anytime you hear formal, that means that somebody is going to sign off on it. In other words, I agree that this is what we are going to do. And it's going to pretty much have things like your information security policy, any other policies for like physical use or device usage, things like that. You're going to have in place a SMIS with all the standards and the management procedures, all the guidelines that are going to support the information security policies. You're going to have strategies in place. Well, how do you get that? Well, according to the ISO standards, which says, hey, if you're going to be running with one of these, this is essentially the way to handle your ISMS. First off, there is going to be plan. You need to identify and recommend what type of measures that you're going to do in order to support things. Now, obviously, we've got the SLAs, you've got your OLAs, you've got your UCs. Well, how do we protect those and acknowledge those? We need to know what the law says about things. There's also ethics that are in place that we probably should think about. If you work in health insurance and healthcare, there is the HIPAA here in the United States, the Healthcare Information and Protection Act, which of course says that anything that is done between a patient and a doctor remains protected, and then the doctors have to make sure they maintain that privacy Okay. Then, of course, once you do that, you can implement. This is to make sure that all those measures, those procedures, all those great things that you put are in place in your policies. Then there is control. I like to think of control as putting everything in place and making sure there's documentation, people know what their roles are, that everything is in order. You're controlling how that's going out. That's how I look at it. Then, of course, there is evaluate. We always do that, right? We need to do audits. We need to make sure that our compliance is evaluated by maybe an outside third-party organization, right? That always helps to make sure to get a new set of eyes on things, so that way we put the blinders up and we just think we're so focused on what we're trying to accomplish, and we think it looks great, but someone from the outside go, well, have you considered this? And you're like, wow, I never even thought about that. That is always good to get evaluated outside. And then once you take that information, you can then give to your management or whoever's handling this, whoever's the owner of this particular process, and they can then take that and maybe implement that into something else. Then there is maintain. Maintain is, as part of continual service improvement, just making sure that the security agreements are documented in the SLAs and improve upon those. Also improve the implementation and use of security measures and controls. It's all about improvement. So maintain is actually another way to improve. And this we might see in the start over CSI, the continual service improvement. So like I said, some real simple, straightforward things that we need to consider and look at for information security management for the Foundations exam. I'm so glad all of you joined me today for this nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.